Hello, and thanks for stopping by this WATESOL 2021 presentation. Whether you're new to Jamboard or just looking to pick up a few ideas, I hope that you'll find something here that you can use in your classroom beginning next week. Simply put, Jamboard is an interactive, collaborative, digital whiteboard. If you've used whiteboards in your physical classroom before, you can adapt those activities to use in a digital space via Jamboard. You can share your Jamboards with your class through a hyperlink, and they won't need to create a new account, although there is also a great app on smartphones. If you have any Jamboard ideas that you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to send me an email at eslteacherdarlene@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Let's get started. So here's where we're headed today. I'll share my aim and some background research on how this tool can be used to provide effective language learning opportunities for beginning and literacy level English language learners. We'll go through some Jamboard examples for speaking and pronunciation, writing, vocabulary, grammar, social emotional learning, and other examples. I'll provide links to these samples, references, and additional resources, as well as a short Jamboard tutorial and tips. This is an example of a sticky note survey. You could write your prompt where the word agenda is and ask your class to respond to the prompt by creating a sticky note that's either anonymous or has their name attached. While I've always been interested in the intersection of English language teaching and technology, the move to virtual teaching made me reflect about the number and kind of tools that I wanted to use with my beginning and literacy level classes. Jamboard was one that I grew to rely on for the reasons you see here. And this is an example of how you could use a Jamboard mind map. My teaching context currently is working with adult beginning English language learners, and some of them are emergent readers. Effective practices for teaching in this context include, from Cunningham, Flores, and Terrell, that every passage has an order, a beginning, middle, and end that's read from left to right and top to bottom. From Curtis and Crudenier, that reading skills instruction includes alphabetics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. And from Vinogradov, that lesson plans that are contextualized and contain a mixture of bottom-up and top-down activities are effective. From Bow Valley College, classrooms that foster a supportive community where respect, empathy, and empowerment continues to develop lead to increased learner persistence. And this is another example of a mind map that you could use during a brainstorming or pre-writing activity. I've picked out 3 standards that can be supported by using Jamboards. From Standard 1, Level 1, learners can practice on Jamboard by identifying a few keywords and phrases in oral communications and simple spoken and written texts. From the second standard at Level 1, students can present simple information and respond to simple yes or no or WH questions. And from Standard 5, Level 1, learners could label information, gather information, or carry out short shared research projects. So let's look at how we can put this into use. I've used Jamboard for daily check-in, controlled practice, and formative assessment in my classroom. As a Jamboard check-in, learners may discuss a problem they are facing, and classmates may provide ideas or suggestions. Also, for my learners who have never used a laptop or a trackpad before, this has allowed them to develop their fine motor skills, such as learning to select an object, dragging and dropping, using drop-down menus, single and double clicking, and keyboarding. The following examples are for inspiration. Remember that you know your class and program objectives, so tailor your activities to meet the needs of your learners. Here's an example from a reading activity. This is a TED Ed talk from Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative. Considering English Language Proficiency Standard 1 for Level 1 learners, they are asked to identify a few key words and phrases in oral communications and simple spoken and written texts. In a unit where learners are discussing their own identity and personal narratives, they watch a very short clip, just a few seconds, of Stevenson speaking about his childhood and a time when his grandmother shared a story with him. Then we discuss any blocking vocabulary, read the sticky notes, and they put the notes into order. We are underscoring basic reading skills and elements of a summary. There is a beginning, middle, and end. We read from left to right and from top to bottom. To differentiate for higher learners, you could add more notes for them to sort and order. Whereas for an emergent reader, you could simplify the language as needed and provide 3 notes so they're practicing the beginning, middle, and end of a passage. This unit was on homes and household repairs. Learners put the conversation in order and practiced it as a whole class, small groups, and partners. Then they practiced it with new information. As you can see, it is color-coded to represent the 2 speakers. For higher level groups, you could skip the color coding or add more to the conversation. For emergent readers, you could provide additional support by placing a number in 2 or 3 of the sticky notes. This kind of activity can be used for controlled practice or formative assessment. It is easy to duplicate the frame so that each learner has their own to work on. There is a limit of 20 frames per Jamboard, but you can just copy the Jamboard and then you could have 40, 60, 80, or 100 frames. Assign each learner a page and ask them to write their name on a sticky note. For emergent readers, you could also use clip art to represent the words instead of print. With a similar format, but moving into 3 columns from 2, you could make a KWL chart. So instead of the 2 columns you see here for egg and tree, you could represent a K, a W, and L, and ask learners to contribute to the Jamboard as an exit ticket. For this writing activity, learners were giving advice to a friend by sending an email. After reading this example of an email, we reviewed the parts of the email before practicing labeling the parts. Then learners created their own email with advice. For emergent readers, they could share a screen with me on Zoom, and then I could request remote control to help them as needed. This vocabulary activity can be used for controlled practice or formative assessment by a whole class, small groups, partners, or individuals. After you scramble the words, select the arrow under the number of the frame and then the snowman on the frame to duplicate it. For emergent readers, you may break this type of chart into the entire week's vocabulary. You can crop the photos so that they're just working on a few words each day, as well as reviewing the ones from the previous day. By the end of the week, you could ask students to create the stickies to put on the pictures. This grammar activity reinforced our oral question of the day: what is he or she doing? After looking at several pictures with a sentence frame, we came to a Jamboard to sort and order the words into a question or answer. Then we noticed what the grammar structure formula would be. For emergent readers, you could choose shorter sentences, while a higher level learner could have a prepositional phrase at the end. For example, she is studying versus she is studying in the living room after dinner. This is one of my class routine slides I use at the beginning of class. I also have used a similar type of slide after an activity to give learners a moment to reflect, either anonymously, or you could ask them to also post their name. This is a way to start developing an empathetic and respectful classroom community. Other check-ins could be fist to 5. Students put their sticky on how they are feeling, matching 1 to 5. A weather check-in using pictures of sunny, cloudy, or rainy, or even clip art. When students get into breakout rooms, they'll start asking each other about their day and why they put their sticky note where they put it. I've asked the class about their high point or low point, the easiest or hardest part of the day, or what activities they thought were the most helpful. They can look at pictures to identify how they think someone in the class is feeling and identify a way that they could respond to that. Some of the learners in my class were brand new to the English alphabet as well as trackpads. We worked on a few letters each day, and learners used Jamboard to practice selecting, dragging and dropping, single and double clicking, while also practicing letter recognition, letter sound production, and keyboarding. I would present them with a few letters a day, and then toward the end of the week, we built up to working with the entire alphabet. Learners can use this type of word wall template to practice creating words and writing them in their notebooks, either as individuals or small groups. This is especially helpful when we've done a reading and now the class can recreate some of the words we saw in the reading. To provide additional support, you could use a smaller number of letters or provide 2 letters already in each box, so the learners are only producing the necessary vowel. For more of a challenge, you could extend the letter length, use additional letters in their letter bank, or another idea would be to use a picture next to the box, so you're providing additional support. In the same way that we practice letters, we also practice sorting and ordering numbers. You could create a matching activity here by adding blue stickies with the words for each number spelled out. Numeracy is another skill that learners identify as an area they need to practice. We can also use this type of Jamboard for simple math problems. So after the numbers are ordered, I would elicit today's date and then ask them what the date will be in 4 days or 5 days using this number line we've just created. In this example of days and dates, we are developing fluency with reading words, numbers, or a combination of the two. This could be used with fewer stickies for emergent readers or just one type, for example, all numbers, until they build their confidence and fluency. As part of our classroom routine during the first week, we ask and answer the question, what day is today? After we've made it through about a week, I ask learners about yesterday and tomorrow and build up to 2 or 3 days in each direction. Once they know the names of the days of the week, we use a Jamboard like this to practice sorting and ordering the days. For emergent readers, I could simplify this by making stickies with 2 or 3 days on them so that they only have to order 2 or 3 boxes until they feel more comfortable. And then they build up to finally being able to order all 7. Many of the activities we used in our in-person classroom are easy to convert on a Jamboard. The advantage is that after oral practice, this could be given to a learner or small group to create stickies with their answer. You can also send the PDF to your learners when they are finished working with it. To provide additional support, a sentence frame could be included in a text box. One of the things I really like about Jamboards is that they start out with a lot of white space, which helps an emergent reader to rest their eyes, to focus on the important parts. And it helps me when I'm designing things to limit the amount of text. It's helpful to do this especially when we are just coming from using the book or we are going to use the book next, because sometimes emergent readers feel overwhelmed by the amount of text that they are seeing. Here's another example of an activity that generates a lot of discussion. After we studied adverbs of frequency, learners could ask one another questions and report back to class what their partners said, or their small group said. For example, do you drink coffee in the morning? And then they would report back, my partner, Aisha, said that she always drinks coffee in the morning. And this type of activity can be used to build a bar graph as a way of creating a class survey and research project. Here's another way to do a class survey. And this is a way to incorporate learner agency and voice into an adult English language learner class. I want to make sure that I'm hearing from the class and creating space for them to make choices about our class journey whenever I can. Now, all of these Jamboards are made of pieces that can be moved, including the pictures. To prevent learners from moving pieces that you want to stay still, after you set it up, take a screenshot of it, and then set that screenshot as your background. Now they can add sticky notes or draw lines without accidentally moving the prompt, the instructions, or the mind map that you want them to work on. Here are my references, and I also wanted to point out places to look for effective templates when you're just getting started with Jamboard. I recommend going on Instagram or Pinterest, or even going to the website Ditch That Textbook. If you're looking for more advanced tutorials, I recommend following these 5 YouTube channels. They provide clear, detailed instructions on a variety of ed tech. Here are some tips when you're just getting started. Make sure you model first. During the first week, I generally am sharing my screen with the Jamboard and talking my way through each step of what I'm doing. Make sure that you post clear instructions on your prompt. If you're virtual, use Zoom's remote control feature. This will allow students to take control of your mouse and move things around on the Jamboard, but in a more controlled environment before they move to the next step of selecting the hyperlink and working with the Jamboard on their own. You can post it in the chat or send the hyperlink in an email, your LMS, or WhatsApp, however you communicate with your learners. On each frame, you can add a sticky that just says name and ask learners to put their name in that sticky so that you know who's been working on the Jamboard. This is great if you're trying to use the Jamboard for formative assessment. When you share your Jamboard with your class, make sure to change the permissions to edit. Otherwise, they won't be able to move the content. During the first week of class, I used these 2 screenshots you see here to help me give remote control of my mouse to the class. I selected remote control and then give mouse keyboard control, and then I would select the learner's name. From here, I moved to sending them hyperlinks. And since many of my learners use smartphones, I also make sure that when I design the Jamboard, I keep the stickies large enough for them to see and manipulate. Let's walk through how to create a Jamboard.
Let's create a new Jamboard. The first thing I do is go to Google Drive, select New, More, and Google Jamboard. Here's my Jamboard. It's just like a big whiteboard, and I can do whatever I want with it. Let's call it WATESOL 2021. That'll just help me find it later on. And select OK. Now I want to create a sticky note so I can ask my students the question of the day: how do you get to school? And I select Save, and then Cancel because I'm not making another sticky note. I can drag and drop this to the corner, use the handle to turn it, and make it larger or smaller. If I click on the breadcrumbs, I can edit, duplicate, or delete my sticky note. Now I want my students to respond, so I need to create some pictures. I'm going to use Add Images, Google Image Search, And I'm thinking about the ways they might come to school. So they might drive a car, and I select Insert. Drag and drop it to the corner, add images. They might take a bus. Add images. They might walk. Insert. They might ride their bike. Add images. They might take the subway. And I always put in an other. Last week, someone told me they rode their horse to school. So okay, the activity we're completing today is a research project which supports ELP Standard 5. We're gathering information through a class survey, tallying the information in a bar graph, and reporting, discussing, and presenting the information. So I want to answer with mine as a model that I drive to school. And now I'm just going to duplicate a few of these as if they were students. And you can see that these students, perhaps some of them bike and some of them take the subway. And we can tally up this information and present it as our research project and then discuss it with one another. So here's just a quick example of how to create your first Jamboard. Let's create a new Jamboard. The first thing I do is go to Google Drive.
Okay, one last thing I wanted to cover was how you share your Jamboard with your class. After you create it, you'll want to share it. So if you go to the upper right corner of the Jamboard screen, after your Jamboard is created, it will be private until you change that setting. So as you can see in the bottom, share with people in groups, you can copy the link and share that with your class. But it's also important to make sure that you select where it says viewer, click on the drop-down menu and change it to editor. Now your class will be able to create sticky notes, images, text boxes, and collaborate. Thanks for attending WATESOL 2021, and a huge thanks to our WATESOL team for coordinating this conference. I appreciate your hard work. Please feel free to go to the Jamboard templates. Remember to select the ... and make a copy before using, otherwise we'll all be on the same page. If you have any questions or ideas to share, please send me a note at eslteacherdarlene@gmail.com. Thanks for joining me today for this presentation, and I hope that you have a great day.